I'm Maile and welcome back to my desk. Today I'm going to be giving you a crash course on college applications. I will be talking about what you need to consider when coming up with your college list and then how to narrow it down into the final colleges that you will actually be applying to. I will also be giving you a brief overview of what a US, UK, and Australian application looks like. Before we get into it, I just want to give a quick disclaimer that all of this advice and information is coming from my own personal experience as an international student applying to the US, UK, and Australia. This is not to say that this information would not be helpful for someone who is applying within their own country, but I just wanted to put that out there and make sure that you are informed. So, I have a feeling that this is going to be a relatively long video, so let's jump right in, shall we? When you start your college list, there are two main things that you need to consider. First off, what do you want to major in? And secondly, what are your financial capabilities? If you know exactly what you want to major in, that's great. But if you still are undecided, that's okay as well. One thing I would keep in mind though is that if you are applying to a UK or Australian university, you will be applying to a course that will dive directly into a selected major. This makes it a little harder if you decide to change majors later on in the course of your education. US schools tend to be a little bit more forgiving because you still have to complete a bunch of prerequisite and general education classes before you actually declare your major, and they're a little more flexible if you do decide to change majors halfway through. Then you need to take into account how much you and your parents or guardians are able to finance your tuition. As we all know, university tuition can be quite high, and it can then impact whether or not you take a gap year, take out a loan, or apply for scholarships. For international students especially, tuition tends to be much more expensive because you don't have the benefit of being a citizen or a resident of that particular country or state, so you're not getting any of the benefits that these students will get. So if you find that your international student tuition is quite high, maybe see if the school or the country will allow you to take out a loan, or if you can apply for certain scholarships that can help you pay for your tuition while you are studying in a foreign country. Once you have that settled, you should start looking into which schools are offering the courses that you are interested in. Personally, I already had a vague idea of which schools I wanted to go to, but it is important to keep your options open and to look at all other schools that are available to you. One of the easiest ways to go about doing this is just going into Google and looking up schools that offer your major. Through this, you might even find schools that you'd never even heard of, but could potentially end up on your application list. Ranking might not be important to everyone, but if you think that ranking is something that you should take into consideration, there are plenty of websites that rank universities by subject or by expertise field. And so you can find these lists and use these to kind of see which schools you want to aim towards getting into or want to consider applying to once you get to that point. From there, you will likely have created a large list of unis. So now you're going to have to go through a very large and broad list and narrow it down to a smaller list of final unis that you will actually be applying to. To start narrowing down your choices, I suggest you find a way to start organizing your list to keep things in order once you start doing your actual research. Personally, I made spreadsheets, and I actually ended up making multiple spreadsheets as I went along. I started with a very large spreadsheet with all of my schools and put in all of the general information, and once I got a better idea of the schools that I wanted to actually apply to, I started making individual sheets for each school to get more in-depth in my research and get better information. Some important things that you might want to consider when actually doing your research is obviously looking into the academic opportunities as well as work opportunities that students get once they graduate from this school or this course, loan and scholarship opportunities that you would get should you need them, or you can even find some information on the actual professors that you think would be interesting to learn under. I would also suggest you look into what it's like living there. Obviously, with the ongoing pandemic, you're not necessarily going to be moving in right away, but it is important to consider what living there is actually like, because hopefully you will eventually be able to move onto campus or actually attend classes in person. For this, you have to consider whether or not you have to live on campus first year or if you can just commute from home. What is the living cost like in that certain city or area? and what is the cost of student accommodations should you need them. I also highly recommend that you go on a tour of the university. UK and Australian schools do what are called open days, and if you are not able to land on one of these days where they have scheduled tours, then you can always contact the administrative staff. They are always happy to set you up for a tour. However, if you are unable to travel or because of the pandemic you cannot physically go to the school and visit, a lot of schools are starting to have virtual tours of their schools on their websites that you can go through and kind of get an idea of what campus is like. One thing that you can try and do is have a conversation with a current or graduated student of the specific course or university. There are plenty of forums online that you can use to talk and ask questions, or there are also a lot of schools that are offering chats with their student ambassadors through their website. However, if you are going to do this, of course, take it with a grain of salt because every student's experience is different, and if you are chatting through the university, you will be talking to a student ambassador whose role is to really bring light to their university, make it look good. So, of course, talk to them, take in their information, ask your questions, but take it with a grain of salt. Once you have done all your research, you can start narrowing down your list to the schools that you actually prefer. Though, keep in mind that some high schools will only support you through a limited amount of applications, and many Northern Hemisphere schools won't actually support you through an Australian application because their school schedules are different and their application time will actually fall right after graduation. Lastly, something that I was unaware of when I first started the application process is that each application is going to have a fee. These can cost anywhere between $50 and $100 US, and if you are applying to a lot of universities, this can really add up. In my opinion, US applications are the most cumbersome. There are several different platforms through which you can apply, but the most used one throughout the US is going to be the Common App. There are three main parts to completing your Common application. Obviously, after you input and select which universities you want to apply to, you're going to have to start by inputting all of your information. This is going to be statistics and data on your financial capabilities, your ethnic background, your educational background, things like putting in your SAT or ACT scores, things like that, and making sure that your transcript is in there as well. The second step is having to write your essay. Every year, the Common App releases a list of questions and prompts for you to use when writing your 650-word essay. Coming up with ideas can be kind of hard, so I would suggest you start by doing brainstorms on some paper, trying to answer the prompt or the question that you have selected. One thing to note about writing a US essay is that American universities really want to get to know you as a person. They really like essays that tell a story, especially those that show character development. Through this, they want to assess your personality and see if you would fit in with their greater student body. The third part of a US application is going to be supplemental essays. Individual schools may ask you to write supplemental essays, and there can be one or there can be several. It really just varies on the school. What they're trying to do through this is get a bigger picture of who you are by giving you specific questions or specific prompts, and they want to see how you express yourself through these essays. These subjects will vary from school to school, as well as how long or how many you have to write. I personally only had to write one supplemental essay for the University of Wisconsin-Madison. However, I did have friends that ended up writing 3 to 4 supplemental essays for one school. Before I move on, I also wanted to touch on UC school applications. If you want to apply to University of California schools, they have their own private platform. The platform asks you to input all your data just like the Common App. However, instead of writing an essay, they will have a list of prompts and questions from which you pick 4, and then you will have 350 words to answer them. I kind of liked this system a little bit better because you didn't have to bother writing supplementary essays, you just had to answer the 4 questions. And through this platform, you are able to apply to as many UC schools that you would like. However, keep in mind that there is a charge for each additional school that you apply to, so it can also get quite pricey. UK applications are actually quite simple. All schools in the United Kingdom use a system called UCAS. Through UCAS, you input your information and then submit your personal statement. Unlike the US, you only have one platform through which to apply, and you can select up to 5 schools to apply to. Also, instead of an essay, you will be writing a personal statement. The personal statement focuses solely on your academic and personal experiences that are geared towards your chosen course. You can try and slip in some information about yourself and extracurricular activities. However, if you reach the point where you are running out of your 4,000 characters, these parts are likely going to be the first to go. What a UK evaluator wants to know is how you have prepared yourself for your chosen field. They want to hear about your experiences and what you've learned through your relevant high school courses, as well as any additional work experience that was required for your course. Especially if you are applying to a more intense course like I did as a veterinary science or a medical student, they will want to know that you have had internship experience in the field and that you are 100% sure that this is the course that you want to get into. The one thing that I think you should look out for when you are completing your UCAS application is the application timeline for your course. Some courses may have a more rigorous selection process that would require you attending an interview, whether that be in person or online, so their application periods will tend to be a little earlier because the whole process is much more lengthy and will require a lot more coordination. This process for me was relatively hassle-free as long as you meet the grade requirements and have a substantial personal statement. Unlike the US application system, the UK makes it quite easy, because instead of having to chase down every school for their different application platform, it's all in one on the UCAS. I also found it pretty nice that you can apply to up to 5 schools through UCAS for only £25, whereas a single application to a university in the US could cost you anywhere from $50 to $70. The Australian application is fairly easy. When I first started looking into colleges, my school actually deterred me from wanting to apply to a university in Australia because they made it sound so much harder to do without the support of my counselor. But don't be fooled. The Australian university application is one of the most straightforward applications ever. When applying to an Australian university, most schools won't even ask you to write an essay. I say most because I only applied to a handful of Australian universities, so some other schools might have some other specific requirements. All I had to do was provide them my information, statistics, data, and transcripts, and then send in my application. These schools ended up being more interested in academics, but if they're looking for more information about you outside of the classroom, they may ask you to fill out a questionnaire on your work experience or your extracurricular activities. They might even ask you to do an interview. The only issue that I had applying to Australian universities is that there was no central application system. If there is a central system for applications, please do let me know, but in the meantime, I ended up completing my applications all on each individual school's platform. Having to apply through all of these different platforms meant that I had to learn and adapt to each individual platform. This also meant that I had to keep track of several different application IDs and passwords, which got a little bit confusing. I also ended up having to pay for each individual application, which was around 100 Australian dollars each, which obviously adds up quite a bit. We have now reached the end of my little crash course. I feel like I've been talking for a really long time, but I hope it was helpful. If you have any additional comments or questions, please go ahead and put those down below. If you liked this video or found it helpful in any way, please give it a like, and if you are interested in seeing more of me in the future, please go ahead and subscribe. If you are going through the college application process, I wish you luck, and don't worry, there's definitely a school out there for you, so keep it up and keep going. Bye!